everybody, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're doing well. So also, sorry, I'm already distracted, give me a minute. I'd just like to say I do have a second channel up and running, so I will leave the link down below for you to check that out if you want to, of course. So yeah, so I am currently rewatching Pretty Little Liars, and one character that I find really interesting is Jason dilaurentis. And my opinion is always quite split on Jason. I personally really enjoyed Jason in the show, and he's up there with not my favorite character. Let's be real, let's be serious, let's take a step back and evaluate the situation there. He's up there with like some of the cool ones on the show, and just a character that I can stand on the show, because there's a lot that I can't stand. Yeah. But he's also done terrible things as a character that I think can't really be ignored, and you have to be like, okay, what the hell was going on there? Do you know what I mean? I'm going to talk about Jason dilaurentis today, and ultimately this is the tragedy of Jason dilaurentis. Where to start? I think Jason's character is very kind of pushed back in the show in terms of like, I don't really see people talking about him, and I feel like he is a character that is so interesting and so kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for, guys? Like, he goes through a lot on the show, and I don't think that's really spoken about because he's not really a main character. For a lot of plots, he's kind of just like a character that needs to be involved in the plot, and I don't think we actually take a moment to step back and be like, whoa, like if you really think about it, Jason went through so much trauma on the show. It's actually incredible. I was writing my notes for this video, and the amount that Jason went through, I was like, what the hell? I had to message my friend who is like my Pretty Little Liars friend, and I had to message him being like, look at this, like, this is crazy, because the show doesn't address it, because obviously he's not a main character. Like, he is, but he's not. Like, he's the main character of like side characters, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Before the night that Alison dilaurentis went missing, Jason was very dependent on drugs and alcohol, and ultimately he took drugs and alcohol because that was his only way to kind of not feel things, because he was going through a lot of things, and this was a way for him to step out of reality and just kind of have some type of peace. I think he was very lost in himself, and this theme with Jason is kind of hinted at throughout the series and kind of shown again, because I think there's parts in the show where he continues to kind of be this lost man. He doesn't really know where he belongs and stuff like that. Then he got roped in with the NAT club, and this is where I don't feel empathy for Jason, because the NAT club, I kind of wish they did more with the NAT club in terms of explaining it properly, because it was a big thing in season 1, because it had Jenna, Melissa, Ian, Jason, Garrett. But then once they found out what it was, that was just kind of it. So the NAT club was a club that all of the people that I just mentioned kind of would spy on the girls. Jason stated that he didn't know about the videos, and he didn't have anything to do with the videos. So I'm not too sure of his like part in the club as much. This is where, although I quite like Jason's character, this was the bit that was like, okay, I don't vibe with that. I don't know you went through stuff and you're traumatized, but like, this is not the way. That's not an excuse to do the NAT club thing. Jason's upbringing was very unstable, and he had a bad relationship with his father, who later turns out not to be his actual biological father, but we will get to that. He had a bad relationship with his father. He was kind of the sibling, kind of like with me. When you're the middle child, that's an experience. That is an experience you will only know if you are the middle child. Jason, I believe, was the middle child. Well, I mean, when you take into fact Cece wasn't actually Jessica's, then technically not. But so I think he experienced a lot of neglect and a lot of kind of, his parents didn't really make a fuss about him and didn't really give him that much attention. It even got to the point where Charles, for Jason, when he was a child, I believe Jason was 7 years old when Charles was taken away. Jason had a really good bond with Charles, but when Charles was taken away, his parents lied to him and said that Charles was an imaginary friend. Imagine that. The person who you thought you had a close relationship with, you're told and manipulated that it was just imaginary all along and that person did not exist. That like must screw with you so much. From then on, that's why he found it hard to form close relationships with people, because of the whole imaginary friend thing. So that kind of probably set into stone for him that he is lonely and he can't form relationships with people and that he should be by himself. I think, in all honesty, Jason was labeled as kind of like the black sheep of the family, and I think he was treated to reflect that. Like, I just don't think they talk about the imaginary friend thing about Charles as much as they should. Because imagine, like, 7 years he's grown up with Charles right next to him as a really close sibling, and then one day that's it, and you're told the whole thing was fake, and like, that's it. I would be like, what? Like, mentally, like I said, like, that must mess you up so freaking much. I think Jason then kind of had a real jealousy for how his parents kind of treated Allison. We could tell there was a massive difference in the treatment of the children. Allison was kind of favored a lot. I think it was a thing of like, daddy's little girl. It's like with me, I have a stronger relationship with my dad than I do my mom, because I think that is just a natural thing if you have both parents in your life. I think this was a case of both parents kind of just attached more onto Allison, and I think Jason was jealous of that, and I don't think he always showed it, which was why I think he bottled it up and then obviously went to drugs and alcohol to kind of deal with it. I think that was just his way of dealing with things. And I always pick up on, when the whole kind of Charles investigation is going on, Jason always said that there was something missing from his family and that he thought he was the thing that was missing and kind of disconnecting his family. Imagine that. This whole time he thought he was the problem with his family. Are you joking? What the hell? We then have the trauma of him finding out about his lost siblings. As we will soon find out, Jason started the show with like one sister and he ended it with like 2 sisters, a cousin, 3 sisters. Sorry, I forgot about Alex. It was just crazy for him to find out all of this information. So we later find out, well, it's kind of early on in the show, I think it's like season 2, we find out that Spencer is Jason's half sister because Spencer's dad had an affair with Jessica dilaurentis. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, family tree is so, like, I just have to correct myself at so many points. We later find out in the show that they're not only half siblings, but they're also cousins as well. So that in itself is really traumatic to find out, because you've not grown up with your other sister, and your other sister turned out to be Alison's best friend for how many years. And then oh my god, who's the dad? Kenneth? Yeah, Kenneth didn't want anything to do with Jason as a child, and as this child who's done nothing wrong, the affair was the fault of Jessica and Kenneth. This child, Jason, has done nothing to upset his dad, absolutely nothing, biological dad. So for Kenneth to despise him, and the way that he talks to Jason in the show is really mean for someone who, like, that's your son. Like, do you know what I mean? So to be hated so much by your biological dad when all you did was be born is the craziest thing I can think of. And I think that also then delves into his kind of loneliness and trauma of kind of the whole family thing and not being loved, because his biological dad never loved him. Sorry guys, I was wrong. I meant to say his biological dad was Peter Hastings, not Kenneth. Sorry. I get confused. The picture of him, I knew who I was talking about because I was like picturing his face. I just forgot his name. My bad, guys. It's Peter Hastings, not Kenneth. Kenneth was Jason's like fake dad, not biological dad. Okay, moving on. My bad. So therefore, Jason never had a stable father figure in his life. Now, I did sociology A level, right? I got a B, right? I got a B. So I know what I'm talking. I'm qualified. Growing up without a father figure can have a really big impact on your life, especially if you are a man. I think that not having that kind of role model to look up to and have along the way of your development into becoming a man yourself is very traumatic for someone to go through. Because you then have to look to men who aren't your dad on how to be a role model, how to be a man, and they are your role model. And you know, when I did sociology in school, it was always talking about this and how this then impacts everything to do with your life. It can impact your education, it can impact your personality, and it can impact the person that you become. So I think having this unstable household will really kind of determine or kind of alter the person that you become later in your life compared to those around you who had a stable upbringing and had a mum and a dad to look up to and to view as like, okay, that's who I want to be as a man when I'm older, or you know, whatever. So I think that's an interesting thing, because then I also look at myself, and although I'm not a man, I look up to my dad and I'm like, right, that's what a man should be like if they grow up nice and in like a stable household. Mine was not that stable, but we're gonna move on. Yeah, you look to yourself, and you know, maybe me with my mom, is that the person that I want to be when I grow up? That's the role model that, you know, it's closely linked to me. That's your role model from birth. You are shown this is what a mum is like, this is what a dad is like, or whoever your parents are. You can be like them and they can be your role model, or you can alter your characteristics and your behavior based on what you've seen from them. So Jason not having that in his life, I think, is really traumatic, because he doesn't have that. And he had two dads. He had Kenneth and he had Peter Hastings. And Peter Hastings he only found out later in his life. And Peter Hastings was so rude to him and treated kind of all of his children just not well. you've got that then. Do you want to be like that? Absolutely not. And then you've got Kenneth, who also kind of neglected Jason and was more focused on Allison. So it's kind of like he doesn't have a stable, good, this is going to be my role model growing up. So then we find out that Cece is his sister, but actually this changes later on and she turns out to be his cousin. This was very traumatic for a few reasons. Because Cece was Charles, who was Jason's imaginary friend, this then has a traumatic response from Jason. Whether you are older or not, there is going to be something inside of your brain that goes back to when you were 7 years old and you had this friend and then you were manipulated and gaslit into believing that everything was fake. That's a very traumatic thing. And then Cece and Jason had a thing. Luckily, nothing sexually happened between them, but for a while they were girlfriend and boyfriend, and like they turn out to be related. So that is another shock in itself. And Cece knew that they were related as well. So from Cece's side, that's just total manipulation. And if something sexual did happen, I think it would be a totally different conversation that we're having. Luckily, nothing did, but that doesn't mean that's not manipulation in itself. And that was just a really creepy thing to find out during that whole reveal. But then we're going to talk about Jason's life kind of after the disappearance. So your sister has gone missing, right? And for a year, you believe that she is kidnapped. So some stranger has got her. That in itself, traumatic, absolutely. Because you're going to blame yourself. And Jason did in fact blame himself, because the night Allison went missing, he was very high on drugs and alcohol. And he couldn't remember if he had anything to do with the disappearance or the murder of Allison. So he finds out, obviously, Allison got murdered. And that, again, traumatic. So imagine not remembering. He mentally could not remember if he had anything to do with his sister's murder, because there would have been built up anger within him from the entire childhood situation. So he didn't know whether he just snapped and he was responsible for Allison's disappearance or not. So that obviously is going to play on your mind. And he was trying to stay sober. So it's not like he could go and drink and take drugs and forget about it. So he was just consumed with the thought of, did I hurt my sister? So then he finds out Allison is alive. Now, grieving is a really long process and it can take years. And I think you'll always remember the person that you've grieved. So the fact that he's gone through the process of grieving and trying to heal from everything, he then finds out actually she's alive. It just kind of reverses the entire thing. And it just adds even more to this traumatic build-up in his brain, because after all of that, after all the worrying and the grieving, she's alive. Sorry, this is going back before she was found alive. The Halloween train where A takes Allison's remains and puts them in like the bar, and then it falls down right in front of Jason. How traumatic. Like, I can't even imagine how, like, your sister's remains collapsing right in front of you after someone stole them. It was actually a gaggery, and like it was actually real TV, but like that's not the point. The point is, that's traumatic for someone to go through. Hello? It was good TV though, Jason. I'm really sorry. Nonetheless. And then the same day that Allison kind of came back, Jason dilaurentis, his mom, was murdered. So it's like he gets one family member back and the other one's just died. It's like there is so much going on in his mind. I can't even imagine it. And then also, not to mention, his Aunt Carol dies. And then although Ian and Garrett are horrible people, and I'm thankful for their passing, that was very mean, actually. Let me take that back. They died as well, and they were like some of his best friends. So then again, more trauma to add to the pile. And then also, A does quite a lot of things to not get back at Jason, because Jason essentially didn't really do anything, but kind of targets Jason. There was the whole elevator situation. That was actually good TV. But sorry, Jason. And then he also got drugged and kidnapped by Cece. And like, he was like paralyzed. Like, he could hear, but he was like paralyzed. Imagine that. Not for me, that.
Nah. Not for me.
So overall, I think Jason is underrated in two ways. I think his trauma is very ignored by the show because he's not a main character. And he is there sometimes just for kind of plot convenience and to move the plot along a little bit, and to kind of, in the earlier seasons, he was only the really dilaurentis family member who showed up. Like, Jessica was there, but she also was not there. Kenneth, don't know where that man is. So it was just kind of Jason representing the family. Yeah, I think he is ignored in a lot of ways. I also quite enjoy his character when he decides that he's going on this change. Once Allison disappears, he obviously turns sober and he tries to kind of become this good person and good man, because obviously Allison's death must have traumatized him so much that he didn't want to be the person that he was before. So for me, Jason is one of the very few characters in the show that shows any kind of character development and improvement within himself. And I really think during the show that he turns into this really, really nice guy and totally leaves behind the person he once was. And I think I really appreciate that from a character in Pretty Little Liars, because not many people get the character development that he did. And I think it is just really interesting, and I think it would inspire a lot of people maybe who may going through the same thing, maybe when it comes to addiction, to change yourself and to, you know, you can do it, and you can become a better version of you and the version that you want to put out there to the world. I think it's a breath of fresh air, his character development, because the writers don't normally tend to stick with a character like that in the show and really develop them into the person that they actually want to become. So I think it was a bit of a fresh air, kind of like Mona's character was a bit of fresh air, even though she was evil, but she was a good evil mother. It was just a breath of fresh air to have that character development rather than the same thing over and over from that character. So yeah, I think that was really interesting, because whenever we see him in flashbacks too, he's always very dazed and very confused and kind of hurting himself in his own way. So to see that change, I think is really, really nice to see. I really wish they focused more on him and kind of Spencer's relationship and Allison's relationship, because he obviously cares about them. And he didn't like to show it at first, but I think he really, really cares about them and wants to protect them. And I think it would have been really nice to see that development a little bit more. I also think Jason could have been involved with the Cece thing a bit more, the Cece reveal, just because I think I think Jason would have sympathized with Cece. I don't think Jason would have been angry. I think Jason would have sympathized, especially because it was Charles and it was the person that he knew as Charles, and I don't think he, especially because of the upbringing that he had, I don't think he would be angry about it. And I think he'd really sympathize. So I kind of wish there was some type of him in that reveal a little bit. I think it would have been very bittersweet for him, but also very healing for kind of both of them, really, for Cece and for Jason. I think it would have been a really good thing to talk about with each other, because we always saw Charles in photos and videos with Jason. I just think there should have been like a little bit of involvement. But the ultimate downside to Jason, like I said, the NAT club, that really throws me off him. And although it's before his character development, so I guess there's room for redemption there, maybe. But the NAT club thing really put me off Jason as a character. Although he wasn't the main aggressor in it, and it was more Garrett and Ian, Jason did have part in it. So he might have not done the videos or was aware of the videos, but he did have some part in it. And I don't like people encouraging behavior like that, and that really threw me off Jason's character. As well as okay, how do I talk about this? The Jason and Arya relationship. I personally think if this relationship had happened when Arya was an adult and her brain had developed and she could make her own choices without the chance of being manipulated, I would have rooted for this relationship a lot. And I do like this relationship over the Ezra one, but I also acknowledge that I think there is a 6-year age gap between them. And Jason trying to have this relationship with Arya when she is underage and she's a minor and her brain might not be developed enough to think for herself. I think that's trouble, and I don't like it. And I like to stay consistent on my views, and I don't like the underage relationships throughout the show, so I don't like this. The age gap is not horrendous, and I know couples in real life, not that are underage, they're fully adults, where, you know, they have like a 5-6 year age gap. And I think it's fine when you're an adult, because it's two consenting adults who both adults can think for themselves. There's no room for manipulation. There's no room for any of that. I think it's fine, and I think if it would have happened when maybe after like the 5-year time jump or just later down the line when Arya's an actual adult and not a child, I would have liked the relationship a lot more. But I didn't, because at the end of the day, it's still an adult taking his power and using it in a way that's not good. Do you know what I mean? I slander Ezra and Arya all the time, so I have to slander this too, because my views are consistent with this type of thing. So I want to make that very clear about Jason's character. I don't endorse these things because it put me off his character a bit, and it really threw me off. That's why I said he's quite a confusing character to get my views on, because I liked him and I liked his development and I like how he changed the person. But the NAT club and the whole Arya thing really drags his character down for me and kind of lets that down. That is it for this video. I would love to hear your opinions on this. I think because, like I said, he's quite a confusing character. So yeah, because there's ups and downs to him, so I'm still quite 50-50 on him, and I just can't come to a conclusion on him, because I feel like the downsides outweigh the positives. Do you know what I mean? But nonetheless, I'd like to hear your views on this. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.